Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for joining our Zoom session today. Before we get started, I'd like everyone to keep their microphones on mute. This session is being recorded and we'd like to limit the extra noise as much as possible. Throughout the sessions, if you have any questions, you could submit them via the chat feature and we'll answer them later in the session. So hi, my name is Jill Crosetta and I'm a junior at Hobart and William Smith Colleges and I'm from Albany, New York. I'm double majoring in English and writing and rhetoric, and I'm also pursuing a minor in Holocaust Studies. Over the time, my course at HWS, I've been involved with a lot of extracurriculars. You might see me next year working at the Human Resources Department, where I've worked for 3 years now. I'm a writing fellow on campus. I'm the Jewish Education Chair of the Hillel Board, and I'm part of the Human Rights and Genocide Symposium. So that's a little bit about me. I'm here today with my Associate Professor of English, Rob Carson. Professor Carson, can you tell us a little bit about your own background and any recent research projects you've been working on?
Sure. Hey, Jill, and hi, everyone, too. I'm a Shakespeare scholar, so I do Shakespeare stuff mostly, but I'm also interested in philosophy. And so usually the work that I do is sort of at the intersection of those two things. Some of it is historical. I get interested in the way that people thought in the 16th century and some of the ways that their thinking might have been different from our thinking. But I'm much more interested in the present. So I'm interested in thinking about how Shakespeare gets used in contemporary culture for different political ends and those kinds of questions. So I'm interested in the historical side of it, but only to the extent that it sort of gets applied to where we are right now.
Yeah. So one of the hallmarks of the HWS education is the ability for students to get to know and work with their professors. So can you explain a little bit more about the many ways in which students and faculty might collaborate in the English department and maybe even in your field?
Oh yeah, sure. First of all, I couldn't agree more. So I'm going to start off by saying I was chair of the tenure committee for a couple of years. And so I got to oversee a whole bunch of tenure reviews for faculties that were coming up. And when that happens, one of the things that we do is we send files out to academics at other schools to weigh in on how they're doing and what we're doing here. And the thing that I heard back over and over and over again from outside reviewers in all of these files that we sent out was they were amazed at the way that our faculty collaborated with our students. And it's a sort of thing that at a big university happens with graduate students. You have graduate students that form a little stable around you and you collaborate with them. But undergraduates are just sort of, there for the money. Whereas at HWS, really what we do is we treat our upper level undergraduates as if they're graduate students. And so we don't just, treat them like grown-ups. We collaborate with them. We end up sort of doing projects with them, publishing with them, and that happens sort of over and over and over again. So I really think that it's as an institution, is one of our real strengths. In English, where I think it happens most of all is with our creative writers. We have as I'm sure you know, Jill, we have a writer in residence program called the Trias Writer Residency that brings, a really serious writer, like an internationally renowned writer, to campus every year. Some of my favorites have been Mary Gateskill, Jeff Vandermeer, Chris Abani, Mary Ruffel. So these are people that, they're pretty serious news. So they come to campus though for a year, and in the fall they run a seminar. So you end up having really sort of hands-on contact with a major figure that way. And then in the spring they end up taking a few students that get in by this competitive process, and they workshop their work with them one-on-one for a couple months. And that's a pretty magic experience that happens here too. I think the English department as a whole, we're pretty tight with students. We get along with them very well, but it's not like the sciences where we actually need lab assistants or people that could be doing experiments with us in the same way closely. But yeah, no, I think that's right on about us.
Yeah, and I could definitely speak on behalf of the Trias program. About a year and a half back, I did a Trias program with Donald Ravel,
Cool.
the poet, and that was such an interesting experience. I did the fall writer in residence program, and as well as the writers that Trias program brings in to have speak and have read. I've attended them basically all for the English classes that I was in, and also for pleasure for some of them.
Yeah.
It's
well,
always fantastic.
I feel like I'm a commercial here, although maybe I am a commercial. but the real benefit of a residential liberal arts experience is that your classes only make up a small part of what you do. And that what you're surrounded by is sort of this environment where people come to campus, people give talks, you go to people's houses, you go out to restaurants. There's sort of this overall sort of sense of community that's around these academic questions and these creative questions, which is part of your life. And so it's great to take a class with these people, but even if you don't take a class with these people, they're around, you meet them on campus, you spend time, and it's part of a whole community thing here, as you know.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. So now I kind of want to talk a little bit about, so the English and comparative literature curriculum is a lot different from what I think students know from high school English. Could you talk a little bit more about the courses available and the concentrations that students can pursue?
Yeah, I wish I knew more about high school English to know how it was different. So I've got teenagers now, and so I'm seeing what they're doing. Yeah, so I mean English as a discipline, we tend to divide it into sort of two big fields, which is sort of the more critical side and the more creative side. But there's usually crossover there. So I think all of our creative writers also teach classes on literary criticism. But there's definitely the more creative side where you get to write stories, write poems, write plays, write screenplays, and write hybrid art forms too. So that's a whole sort of making side that probably doesn't happen very much in high school. And then on the critical side, you were there more recently than I was, but it moves away. Really, high school English feels kind of Mickey Mouse from what I remember. And so I think that this moves away from just sort of doing some very basic toolbox stuff about talking about metaphors and similes and things and symbols, and then moving on to doing, looking at the way that literature raises much more complicated political, social questions, sort of wrestling with literature and context. Does that seem fair to you?
Yeah, and I think that kind of leads into the types of concentrations that are available within the English department.
Well, really, you can concentrate on whatever you want. So, we have traditional offerings around, sort of canonical British and American and world literature, poetry, prose, drama. And then there's film. And so we also have a media and society department on campus that we kind of overlap with. I think we need to figure out what goes where. But historically, film has been taught both in English and in media and society. And so that's a whole, and then there's comics. We offer classes on comics. We look at graphic novels. I don't think anybody's doing video games yet, but the way that, English as a field is very far reaching now. We sort of look at narratives of all forms. We look at language expressions in all different forms. And so it's not just a traditional short story, novel, poem, play, curriculum anymore, essay. Those are, I guess, the 5 things there used to be. So now it's a memoir. I think we're looking a lot more broadly at sort of new forms, new media, flash Twitter poems, poems that vanish after 45 seconds, all kinds of things like that.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely one of my favorite parts about majoring in English is that I've seen literature in so many different contexts, writing in so many different contexts, and being able to explore that both critically and creatively.
Cool.
And I mean, that's, you have to do that in order to achieve the major. You go through the British literature, the American literature, different portions of literature all over.
And you're in writing and rhetoric too, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's another place where we kind of overlap. Because do you see a giant difference between your classes, between us and them?
I've always looked at, I guess my writing classes in the English curriculum are definitely more creative geared, whereas the writing and rhetoric is more practical geared writing. But definitely there is very clear overlap. Like my creative writing class that I had taken my first year was a cross of writing and rhetoric in English, as well as small press book publishing that I took, which was also a very unique experience because it was reading these manuscripts. So you got the literary half, but then you also got the editing half that writing and rhetoric definitely takes.
Yeah. So, I think we're certainly not an island. And then the other thing with English, and you brought up comparative literature too. We offer, and there are a whole bunch of different modern language departments on campus that offer, like Spanish, French, Russian, German, that sort of thing, that offer classes not just in the languages that they offer, but also in literature from those cultures in translation. And so there are ways that towards an English major, you could be taking classes in the French department or the German department or the Spanish department, because we don't really see, there aren't any big walls here. It's a pretty flexible curriculum.
Yeah, and I love what you said about the translated texts, because this semester when I was studying abroad in England, one of my classes was European literature, and we looked at all different languages in translation. It was like strictly a class about texts in translation, and that was such an interesting course to me. I know HWS has these courses as well, and it's just the ability to being able to explore other languages literature it's so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I was on the curriculum committee, because I do all the committees, a couple of years ago, and it was really important to us as we looked at how we wanted to set up our curriculum to recognize that we wanted to have rigor. You didn't want to just have it be like, Neverland, where people swing on the ropes and play with crocodiles or something. You need to have some sort of form of structure there. But as we sort of talked to students, and as we talked to faculty, and as we talked to alums about their experience, everybody was really adamant that they didn't want the curriculum to feel like a straitjacket, that it had to be something that, the joy of this place was the fact that there aren't that many walls, and that there's sort of a bit of a playground atmosphere where we get to explore and collaborate and cross over. And so I think we've done a good job at finding a balance here, at trying to make sure that students work hard for the sake of getting stuff out of it, right? There's no point in working for nothing. So that students actually gain a whole lot by going through the hoops that they do have to jump through, serve some purpose. But that beyond that there's a lot of room for just inventing your own HWS.
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite parts about the English major. My English major could be entirely different from someone else's English major, from the courses that we've taken and the concentrations that we've pursued.
Excellent. Then it's working.
Well, I'm glad. One of the things on the top of my mind for a lot of my peers during the college search was what they could pursue after graduation. Is there a popular track that students from the English department follow, or do the majority go off to grad school or pursue a specific type of job?
We have some students go to grad school. I feel like we shouldn't have that many. I mean, grad school in English is one of those things where the main reason to do it is to go on to teach, and we only need so many English faculty members. There are probably too many of us already, frankly. So I mean, but the English major turns out to be just a really sort of it's one of the most employable majors. There are numbers to back this up. Even though we're English majors, we can count a bit. So one of the things that we found is, and I think the reason is that when people hire somebody with a BA from a liberal arts college, what they're kind of thinking of is an English major, right? Like the sorts of things that a liberal arts degree says is that this is a person who can think on their feet. This is a person that can handle responsibility. This is a person that has a certain degree of independence. This is a person that can write well because they've been forced to do a lot of writing. This is a person that can speak well because they've had to do a lot of classwork. This is a person that can collaborate well. And so the sort of skills that you have there about sort of communication skills and critical thinking skills and interpersonal skills are the things that we associate with English majors. So I think that one of the reasons that our graduates tend to be really employable is that they're what, when somebody is looking to hire somebody to be on a team, to work in communications, to work for a business who's capable of doing a lot of different things, English majors sort of, it screams competence and flexibility. And so I think that that's one of the reasons that it's really good. Whereas you don't tend to train to be a poet, really. Like it's nobody sort of says, this is my career path, I'm going to go on a, but I mean, if you do, we handle that too a little bit. But yeah, it's sort of the utility infielder, which is a sports metaphor. I sort of understand.
There you go.
But yeah, somebody who can play the different positions is who I think an English major is. We produce a good number of teachers. Obviously, there's a very natural path to go to be an English major and then get your teaching certificate and teach English. So a lot of my favorite students, that's what they went on to do. We produce our fair share of lawyers. We're sort of like history and philosophy and poli-sci as being sort of in the core of the pre-law stream. But yeah, I think that's probably where they mostly go.
Yeah.
And some of them do go on to become poets and novelists. We're very proud of those that go off and do MFA programs and that continue in that direction. So yeah, I think of them too, but I think that probably if we're looking at, we graduate dozens and dozens of English majors every year, and most of them go on to jobs in the world.
So my last question before we open up to the audience, Professor Carson, how do you make a case for the value of a liberal arts education and an English major in today's society? Which I think maybe feeds a little bit into the last question.
Yeah, I said some of that, but I'm sure I've got more in the tank. When we were when we were doing this curriculum review a couple of years ago, I talked to a bunch of, what do we call them? Important people, so people that were like HR directors for big companies. And the thing that I heard from them most often was that when they hired liberal arts grads, what they were getting was team players. They said that the difference between us and like Harvard or Princeton or other places that on paper seem fancier than we are, is that they said that when they hired Ivy graduates, people would come out of the Ivies having no idea how to work with people. They just, they'd spent their time in the library getting A- or whatever they had to do, just, slogging away to climb the, not to take anything away from those educations, they're really serious, but these aren't necessarily people that have social skills. Whereas liberal arts grads, because they're in classes of 10 people or 12 people most of the time, and they get given projects they work on collaboratively, and they have to present a whole lot, and they get all kinds of feedback, and they talk to faculty in office hours. They're really used to sort of working together on things, and they develop sort of a skill set that actually makes them really, really employable, right? That's who when you hire somebody new, you don't want someone that is going to try to take over the entire place. You want to have somebody that knows how to work on a team. And that recognizes sort of the value of the collective, right? And so I think that that's one of the things that, there's all the usual stuff people say about liberal arts, that it is, the best way to do critical thinking. Critical thinking is very hard to teach, except by having lots of small jobs that require you to be a little bit smarter every time. And the best way to do that is with face-to-face contact, with lots of feedback, with lots of interactions. Same thing with writing. The only way to get better as a writer is to write and write and write and talk and talk and talk, and then look at, this is a writing fellow, right? That, you're never going to teach somebody to write by giving them a book to say, follow these rules and they'll be a better writer. The only way to do it is to have a conversation, right? Or to have 1,000 conversations. And so I think the value of the liberal arts education, especially the residential one, where you're sort of immersed in this community, is that it shows you that your college education isn't just something that you paid for. It isn't just something you signed up for. It's not something you logged on for, which is unfortunately where we are right now. But it's something that you immerse yourself with, right? And that it is 4 full years of your life that helps you grow as a person in different ways and gives you a skill set that employers recognize. I hate to sell it. I hate to sell the value of this as being that it gives you better jobs. But one thing about this is that it makes you employable. More importantly, when I teach a FirstYear seminar every year. I love FirstYear seminars because I love seeing the students as they come in. And I love teaching our capstone classes at the end to see students as they go out. I can't believe the difference between the students that turn up on our door and the students that leave us. Like, I feel like 4 years here turns, with no offense to the people who are thinking of coming, but there's a way that you're a brand new adult at that point. You're a new baby chicken coming out of the egg. You're all slimy and weird and hairy and that sort of thing. And then you leave as a fully fledged chicken. You've got all the feathers and waddles and everything you need to do. But that sort of transition from brand new, trying to figure out where you're going to go, to really being together, it's like a magic thing to see. And I think we do it better than big corporate cookie cutter schools that take in 60,000 students at a time and turn out 50,000 students later after cashing their checks.
And that's such a lovely metaphor you made. I definitely talking about the value of a liberal arts education, even coming out of high school, and personally for me, being able to have the liberty to essentially choose your own courses and to go down a path that you want to go down, I think is very liberating. And I think one of the things that I really had trouble with, especially in high school, was almost the confines of general education classes.
Mm-hmm.
You were being forced every year to take a new math, a new science, and you didn't really get any choice in the matter. And I think that's something that's also really important to liberal arts education, and especially here with the way that our goals system works kind of uniquely, so we could kind of tailor the courses, our schedule, to fit the types of things that we want to learn. And even though we have, maybe a double major and 2 different things, we also have room to take a sociology course or take a philosophy course or take even a math of our choice. And I think that's just something that's really liberating.
Even a math, you know.
Yeah, even a math. I took calc and
I find when my first year students come in and I talk to them, they often tell me that, I'm going to be a this major. They've figured out before they even set foot on campus what kind of a major they're going to be. And I sometimes tell them this, and I sometimes just think it. But I feel like if by the end of their second year they haven't completely changed their mind, that we've failed them, right? Our whole point here is that if somebody comes in thinking that they have a future plan for themselves, we should offer so many cool alternatives to you that it shakes your convictions and makes you think about how you want to change. There's nothing that makes me happier than finding out that somebody came in pre-med and turns into a history major or something, some sort of transition that you didn't see coming. And there's also nothing that makes me happier than somebody that ends up double majoring in two things that totally don't go together. Like I love English math double majors. If anybody can do a math degree and an English degree, that's like, what kind of a person, I can't imagine that. But that's like my ideal kind of student, somebody that ends up finding two things that they love, or they end up doing a music degree and a poli-sci degree at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I was a little bit different in a sense that writing and rhetoric and English go very nicely together, but I didn't think of Holocaust studies and minoring in that until I had gotten deep into my second year. And I think that was, if you had asked me when I had come into HWS if I'd be minoring in Holocaust studies, I would have not even known that was something that I could be pursuing.
Right. Absolutely.
So I think that's
it sounds interesting. I mean, like not only is it clearly something that is meaningful to you and showing your, but as you sort of as you put your CV together going out in the world too, it's one of those things that makes you sound not like a cookie cutter liberal arts grad too. You're an English major, which gives them all the sort of it gives them what they expect and gives them something that seems respectable, dependable, that sort of thing. But then there's an interesting twist that you were a Holocaust Studies minor, and that's something where all of a sudden there's a talking point for your interview when you come in. That'll probably be one of the questions that you face as you go into job interviews.
Yeah,
they tell us about, because they know about English, right? But they'll say, "Tell us about this. What was that about?"
Yeah. So thank you, Professor Carson. And I see something came up in the chat, a question. So, it asked, can you explain what a writing fellow is? I don't know if that's to me.
It's for you.
Oh,
now, why don't you do that?
Okay. So the writing colleague program and the writing fellow program are interconnected here at HWS. So the way that process kind of starts is you will get a nomination to become a writing colleague, and you go through an interview process and an application process. If you get accepted to that program, you start the seminar the next semester, which is a one semester course that kind of teaches you about how the writing pedagogy and how writing is implemented into all subjects into the curriculum. And then you begin your writing colleague experience. So that is when you are in a classroom and you are specifically there for that students. Oftentimes, a lot of freshman seminars use writing colleagues. So if you have your freshman seminar, you might have a writing colleague, and this will give you some insight as to what they do. They're sort of the facilitator between the professor and the student. They'll meet with you one-on-one and go through all of your typically first drafts of your papers. And then they'll also come to your classes and be there and available to answer any questions. So after you do 2 placements of those, so during my writing colleague experience, I was in a freshman seminar called First Person Singular, which I know Professor Carson had mentioned we do memoir writing, and that was a specific memoir writing class. And it also happened to be my first year seminar, so that was kind of a unique experience. And then my second placement was in the writing colleague seminar. So I was actually a writing colleague for future writing colleagues.
It makes you a super writing colleague, I think.
Yeah, I think that gives me maybe some new title. But after that, I could apply for the Writing Fellows program. And the Writing Fellows is a paid job in the Center of Teaching and Learning in the library, where students can come into you by appointment or by drop-in hours and have you look at a paper of any subject. So Writing Fellows are specifically trained to look at any sort of subject of paper. And that's also a great resource that anyone can use as you come into your first year. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of our great assets too. So again, when we did this new curriculum a couple of years ago, we adopted something called a writing enriched curriculum, which is a new model that came out of Minnesota. And I think we're still the only liberal arts college that uses it. But it recognizes that um, learning to write is something that uh, isn't something that you can do once in one place. You can't just sort of make somebody take a class in freshman comp, as it used to be called, and make them do one semester where they feel like they're in jail and they have to turn out things, and then somehow their writing gets better. Their writing shows very little improvement when you do a freshman comp class. So the way to get people to be better writers is to make them write about the things that matter to them. So ideally, if they're majoring in things, they should be doing some form of writing within their major. And then just being really attentive to it. But the trick is that not everybody in physics and music and poli-sci is trained as a writing instructor. So part of it, having a writing enriched curriculum, is making sure that every faculty member on campus, every department on campus, reflects upon how writing works within their major and how they're teaching writing within their major. So that was sort of one prong of doing this, is trying to start this conversation among the faculty, where we all sort of commit to saying that teaching writing is everybody's job. It's something that we all contribute to, and that we all need to take responsibility for it, because students learn it from all of us. And then the thing that backs us up really, really well is this sort of army of writing colleagues and writing fellows that are out there that are peers, so that students are able to get feedback from people they get along with, people that they're not intimidated by, people that they will see in the bars afterwards too, who can then give them sort of help and feedback at a way that faculty can't always, because we're coming at these things from a great distance. It's been a long time since we wrote an undergraduate paper, even though we read them all the time. And so, so that I'm such a fan of the program. I think it's one of the things we're really great at here.
Yeah, and I am too, like being on both sides of it, having had a writing colleague and going to the writing fellows, and now being on that other half. I think the conversational part of improving writing is so important. I know you articulated on that earlier, but being able to sit down and actually talk to someone about your writing process, I think, is probably the most effective way that you can edit a paper. I know that I don't think I could edit a paper without talking to someone about it. Previously or before, or I guess maybe if no one's around, talking to myself about it, but just the being able to have the tool of having a conversation and talking, I think really will improve a paper. I've talked to so many students that have seen improvement just from going to the writing fellows once or twice and, finding that help they need.
Cool. Are there more questions?
So I have one.
Okay.
So I saw that you were teaching an FSEM, and I know you kind of briefly touched upon that you love teaching them. Can you tell us a little bit more about an FSEM, what one you're teaching, and just kind of maybe what an FSEM is, especially in an English?
Yeah, so these are first year seminars. So every student coming to the colleges takes a first year seminar. First year seminars are classes that they're real classes, first of all. It seems like it's not like homeroom or something, so it's meant to be a real class, but it is taught on a subject that is usually a little bit more fun. Usually faculty members are a little bit out of their area. That we're sort of encouraged. So I'm normally, in real life, I'm a Shakespeare professor. They would discourage me from teaching a first year seminar on Shakespeare, because if I taught a first year class on Shakespeare, it would be my Shakespeare class, right? So the idea of a first year seminar is you're supposed to teach on something that you're not an expert on, maybe. Ideally something you love. And so I think, for me, the best first year seminars that I've seen are kind of passion projects. And what makes them effective is that if you're dealing with a faculty member who is passionate about something, but maybe not an expert in that thing, that's sort of more of the situation that first years are coming in with, that there's something where they want, what they want to have an opportunity to do is to get excited about something and learn about it at the same time. And so it's a little bit more of a level footing. But also because I don't feel responsible for teaching this as part of an English major or something, I can focus on doing things like really getting to know the students, really figuring out what sort of things they're going to need to succeed. So diagnosing any sort of issues with writing or with study habits, or things that we can fix so that, that they're going to, if they hit some turbulence in their first semester, that we can try to fix those things, and that I'm there to notice that. To get them to know them each personally, help them sort out their things that are there. So I become their advisor. And so your advisor is somebody that is a person on faculty that helps you choose your classes and helps you come up with your plan and helps you troubleshoot problems as they come up, and is there in your corner if you have a problem in some other circumstance that I'm there for them. So it's part of that. And so yeah, my subject is on British pop music. It's a class called Brit Pop. It uses sort of the history of pop music in Britain from World War II to the present as a way of doing cultural history in Britain. So it's called From the Beatles to Brexit. And although we actually start before the Beatles a little bit, we start with Vera Lynn, who of course is popular this week again. She seems to be back in the news on the front lines with the NHS. But yeah, so we end up looking at everything from British invasion in the 60s, through glam and punk and Britpop itself in the 90s, up into grime and things that are going on in contemporary British hip hop, as a way of sort of talking about the evolution of British culture over the past 60 or 70 years, and using that as a way, in turn, of looking back at America. And I think the reason that I like to study Britain is that, because most of our students we have international students too, but most of our students that are coming in are Americans and know our culture pretty well. Studying other cultures, like if you're going to study Vietnamese culture or Senegalese culture or cultures from other parts of the world, it often will feel very, very different to most of our students. But Britain is weird because it's actually just like a little bit sideways. It's just, it's something where it's pretty approachable. The language is mostly in common. Cultural reference points are pretty consistent. But it's just weird enough and just different enough that every now and again you can start to feel a little bit transported. And so I'm Canadian myself. I'm from Canada, so I sort of grow up. I grew up in a world where I was always kind of Americanish feeling, but also America was always different. And so I'm interested in the ways that we can have cultural encounters with places that are our cousins or that are close by. Because I think that there's stuff to be gained from looking at cultures that are very different from us in space or in time. But there's also something to be gained from looking at cultures that are just a little bit different from us, because you start to notice differences and nuances. So it's a class that ends up sort of reflecting upon culture in that way too. It's kind of an anthropology class.
Yeah, and I could give you a personal plug there, because I know before, although I never took the freshman seminar class, before I studied abroad in Norwich, England, me and Professor Carson had, say, like half-hour to hour-long meetings where he would just tell me about British pop culture and get me to the level I needed to be when I went to the UK.
Yeah, it's fun. My dream, which has never happened, but I was hoping, I'm hoping this is the year, is that it actually turns into full-on School of Rock, and I get to be like Jack Black. And because I basically want my first year seminar to form a band and put on a show. And so this is the year, assuming we're all back on campus, this is the year where I swear it's going to happen. We're going to have some sort of December rock spectacular, special guests, posters, kick out the jams, all this sort of thing.
This is your personal plug to these students joining.
Everybody should join the School of Rock seminar. We'll learn to play the bass.
And it'll be slightly UK influence,
right.
All UK influence. And I guess I could ask one more question. I know we had kind of mentioned this when we talked about earlier on the discussion, but maybe if we could just answer it head on. So what majors and minors do students often pair with English? I know you said that there's a myriad of different things, obviously, but are there ones that you see more than others?
Sure. So, I mean, the writing and rhetoric pairing with English is a classic combo. So you're doing this, you're representing really well. The other sort of standard ones are media and society, which is, I'm never clear why they're different from English, frankly. They're looking at texts that are a little bit less traditional. They tend to be looking at film and TV and forms of advertising and documentary and that sort of thing. But we're close cousins with media and society for sure. I'm not positive that I can always tell where one class should go. And then the other one is theater too, especially as a Shakespeare scholar. I have a lot of focus in my work on Shakespeare on stage. And there are certainly Shakespeare classes taught in the theater department that could be my classes, more or less. And theater history classes that could be my classes. And so I think the most natural pairings are English with media and society, writing and rhetoric, and theater. Languages are common. History is common. Poli-sci is common. Poli-sci is really common. And I think that just seems to be, if you're politically minded and sort of aware of the role that language plays in all of this, that if English helps you explore the language side of things and political science helps you explore the ideology side of things, I like those majors. I think I think they go really well together. But as I said before, though, I love, English and biology majors, and I love English and math majors, and I love the weird, unexpected combinations too.
Yeah, so I think this is
I mean, to call them
probably
weird. I feel bad that I do the unexpected and interesting, not the weird.
no, yeah, I was going to finish up by taking one last question, but I think maybe you had answered this already, just asking if there are anything that you can't pair with English or something that you feel is incompatible.
The only one that I know of, or not that I know, so pre-med, which is sometimes with the biochem major, is kind of already a double major on its own. And so students that I've had that have wanted to do a biochem major, it has enough requirements in it that you could squeeze in an English minor for sure. But I think it might be technically, it would be a challenge to do both of those. You might need a summer class or two. So yeah, I mean, I think in theory, anything's possible. The only time that I've felt any tension was trying to find English pre-med double majors. I know pre-med's not a thing, but English biochem double majors could be tricky.
So that is all the time we have for today. So thank you guys for joining us. If you have further questions or you'd like to get in touch with one of us, we've dropped our emails in the chat for you, or the Office of Admissions can always connect you to us as well. So thank you for coming, and I hope to see you guys on campus next year.
Thanks, Jill. This was really fun. Yeah, and I'll read it. For some reason, I can't see the chat at all. But yeah, my email is carson@hws. If anybody has any questions, I'm very happy to answer.
Oh, I can.
No, we're good.
Yeah, I don't know if I can see it.
Okay. Okay, so thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.